The way that history is framed to us is highly subjective, and I remember learning from one of my wonderful teachers growing up. Like, one of the things I remember, like, my history teacher saying is, like, history is written by the conquerors. Like, that's a common phrase here. Like the perspective of what we look back upon has widely been shaped by the perspective of the people who
Mm-hmm.
won the war, by the people who, and usually those were the people who, with a certain type of, more often than
Right.
not, fucked up ideology, who were oppressing a lot of people. And, like, the voice of the oppressed, I think now a lot of historians have been going back, and especially in these, like, past more recent years, and reshaping narratives of groups that did not have their voice heard and throughout history. And I think that is part of, again, like, and I'm getting so much chills as I'm saying this, like the rise of the divine feminine.
Mm.
Welcome to Cosmic Connect. I'm Frenchie.
I'm Blue.
What's
And
good?
good. How have you been? It's been like a week since I talked to you.
It's been quite a bit. It's been a wild time. My family's in town. It was the first time that I saw all my siblings, that we were all reunited in years. So we just squashed a bunch of things and we're doing, like, bam, bam, bam. So it was like a super, super packed, busy, but happy, fun times. How about you? How's your week been?
This week has been wild. I worked like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, like my usual schedule. But we've made several trips of things from my apartment to my salon. So this room probably has a little bit of an echo right now because all I have in here is my podcast table and
Oh my
my
goodness.
plants.
You're
My
in
bikes
moving
are in the
mode.
closet. So
Wow.
we have almost everything that's like things you just don't need every day kind of moved there to like
Mhm.
kind of mitigate some of the timing of everything because we get the keys on Thursday. Today is what, the 11th? 12th. It's the 12th today.
Tuesday is
We
Sunday.
close and get
Mhm.
the keys on the 16th, which is Thursday. So once we have the keys, then we can
Ooh.
kind of figure out, arrange with some friends and family some trucks, and we're gonna move all of the essentials from here to there so that that's done. And then that weekend and after, we can kind of like figure out what's necessary to move to the house before we have all of our trips because we have a few trips lined up that are like right back to back. The retreat
Yes,
for
your
goddess,
June is wild packed.
yeah,
Your June is
the
like,
the retreat
what?
for goddess hangs, and then right after that, I literally come home, and the next day I leave for Montana.
Oh my
So,
gosh, you got like
yeah,
one day in between.
yeah, maybe
Well,
24
that's
hours.
exciting.
Yeah,
That's exciting. It's like that time of year where, like, all the things are happening. It's very
yeah,
Gemini season to me. Like, oh yeah, we're just casually doing a million different social things at once, and casually
yeah.
just moving into a whole house while doing a million other things.
Yeah,
Regular
we
Gemini
were
stuff.
talking about that. We were like, "We are the only crazy people that buy a house and then take off for 2 weeks." Like, who does that? Like,
Yeah.
usually if you have to leave for 2 weeks, it's because you have, like, people, like, doing things at the house. No, we're just going on vacation.
Hey, but that's like, I feel like that's almost even more awesome because it just shows how much you're like, yeah, we just bought a house.
Yeah. Yeah, talk
It
about
just
living
happened.
abundantly.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. It's like, yeah, we do this every Thursday. We buy a new house. This is nothing new. We just buy a house, go on vacation. We'll be back. Come on.
exactly,
It's nothing.
exactly.
But I'm like so excited because, okay, so So stuff that I had done with my family, like we went to the Metropolitan Museum, we went to the Brooklyn Botanic Gardens, which are just beautiful, gorgeous.
Oh,
I got so excited. The roses, they have this crazy dope, beautiful rose garden, and like all the roses were like perfectly in bloom. Got to
uh,
smell them all. I smelled some roses. I was like, I never smelled a plant that smelled like this before. Like it was so cool.
oh,
Um,
and it's so different in those environments. Like when you smell a rose, like in someone's
mhm,
backyard versus something like that, because they really like cultivate the soil and make sure it's just right and just,
mhm.
oh,
Yes, it's wild. Like I used to go there a lot, but like I never went there when the roses were really like blooming like that.
mm,
Um, but it was yeah, like this is something really cool about that place. Like I used to pop in, like it was on my way to my commute from when I was in college. So I would just like
mhm,
pop off and I would get in with my student ID for free and like so I would just go
nice.
in I would walk through the botanic gardens and it would usually be like very, very empty. And I would just like pretend like it was my castle grounds and shit. And I'd be like, yeah, living a
Yes.
life.
That's a good way to
Exactly.
manifest. That's an
Right?
excellent way to manifest, like, because anyone can have a backyard look similar to a botanical garden, you just have
Yes.
to, like, it's a lot of work, there's people
Mhm.
that are t maintaining that every day, so
Yes.
it has to be something that you're very passionate about, but, you
Or
can
you
do it
can
and
hire somebody who knows how to do that shit.
yes, or you can be that abundant and just have somebody that takes care of it for you, of
Yeah, just
course.
I mean,
But
if we're
yeah, I
affording the
think
castle, we can afford a keeper.
well,
That's
yeah,
my
right. Yeah,
thinking.
depends on I was just saying you could really manifest anything from having it yourself
Mhm.
to having someone do it for you, like, the whole thing, walking through something like that, like, the ma
Anything is
it's so
possible.
magical.
It really is. And like
Yeah.
yes, and like that and like going to the Met and you see all these like ancient treasures. Oh my gosh, I had a
I have
wild
no idea.
experience. Yeah, okay, in like the ancient Near East, like in like Babylon and like the
Mm,
Akkadians and all those, and they have like the winged like creatures with like there's like the lion claws and the
yeah.
bull, and then they
Mhm.
have the human heads, and so they have this room in the Met that has like the entry is just like that. There are two of the winged things, and like a lot of people say that those are like connected to the Anunnaki, which are said to be like the people who, not the people, they're like a galactic kind of race who are very tied with the crafting of the three-dimensional reality. That's kind of like the general way that I've heard it. And so
Okay.
a lot of people say that that's who they are, but I always they have some of those creatures in the Brooklyn Museum too, which I used to go to a lot, and I would always get these like crazy chills when I would like be seeing these things. And when I tell you, I like walked in the room, and my brother can tell you that like I walked in the room and like I stood in front of one of them and he was like looking at me and like he was just like talking to me and like I just was like I felt like this my third eye was just like zoom zoom zoom, like it felt so crazy, like I felt like I was raising my vibration and like going in a whole different dimension, just like being in this room. And like I must have looked like a crazy person because I'm just standing like literally in the being like in this museum in front of this guy just like whoa, like whoa, like just in awe, like in silence and just being like, yo. And like my brother is like, you ready to go to like the next room? And I'm like, I just like looked at him and I nodded like no, like just and then I kept looking at the guy for like another 10 minutes. But I was like, I have to. I was like, I gotta receive the transmission. I don't know what's happening, but I gotta be here. And my brother's like, all right, cool, like whatever. But we'll be in the next room or whatever.
Wow, intense. You
But
know,
that was fun. That was a fun thing that happened this week.
art is transformative and it can totally, like, tell you something, so the fact that, you know,
Yes.
people that aren't tapped in have moments where they're entranced by a painting, so I totally
Mhm.
believe that that art just captivated you in that moment, and you were probably are receiving something
Mhm.
because you are so tapped in, but, uh
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you would look, odd doing that in that particular place. Do you know what I mean? Like, cause like, it's art.
Yeah, like, it's not the weirdest thing, like,
No, no, no.
yeah, if it was
No,
just a
not at
random
all.
statue in the park or something, it might be a little more weird, but
I don't know, I
not
mean
even I feel like art is made to be looked at, you know? I
yeah,
think that it's
exactly. I mean,
you
we've all seen
you
somebody where we're
can
like,
be in awe of
"I
whatever
don't
you want.
know. You're on a different plane right now looking at that art." But I feel like, well, usually people that are tapped in are the people that acknowledge that. Like, so, I don't know.
Mm,
Like, but
yeah.
I've seen people in art museums where they're just like and they just are standing
Yeah,
there
literally,
forever.
like,
Yeah. Just taking
I
in all the
mean,
brush strokes and every little,
yes,
detail. So and
yes.
those sculptures are impressive, and especially, I can't speak for those. A lot of them are so, like, old because I feel like
Mhm,
sculptures now are just usually that modern style, like, with
mhm,
metal, and it's not as much with the stonework as it was. Like, not
right.
dissing anyone that's doing that, I'm sure there are still artists out there that do that, but I just feel like the massive sculptures are just something that's usually from another time. So,
Mhm. Yeah, and it would
when they
take, like, generations to create this thing,
yeah,
and they would do it, and
yeah.
it's so cool to me. Yeah, and, like, I mean, even just I don't know, like, quote, unquote, "regular art," that like, more modern art, like, artists working today, it's like, even that people will be entranced by and I don't mean even, I don't mean to demean because
Oh, yeah,
I
yeah,
love all art, but, like and a lot of it is divinely inspired as well, I would say, and, like oh, and I saw this new paint it's well, it was new to me, I hadn't seen it, but they had this, like, modern art section, and there was this huge, huge green, like, two-part painting, and it was, like me and my brother both were like, "Whoa, it's so cool," and it was, like, all these different colors of green. So there was,
yeah.
like,
Ooh.
definitely, like it's cool because there's, like, modern art that will be just as fascinating as but I to me,
Oh,
what
yeah,
can
totally.
sometimes be, like, extra fascinating about the, like, ancient ones is, like, it's not necessarily even just art because I think a lot of people today think, like, "Oh, this was just art for art's sake," but it really had deep spiritual significance to these people, and it wasn't there's a deep, like, level of spirituality and just connection to that culture, which I think a lot of people when they go through museums aren't necessarily thinking of that, but it's like, this is depicting a god, so it's not like somebody was like, "Oh, know what? I'm just gonna, like, paint a picture," you know what I mean? It's like, no,
Yeah.
this means a lot of things that
Y
you cannot even
yeah.
fully comprehend, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you know what it makes me think of is, crests, like, family crests, like, you know what
Oh,
I mean?
yes.
Like, those were
Yes.
so important, it, like, showed your family and, like, what the connections were and what their strong suits were and all of those things, and it
Mhm.
really meant something, and I feel like sometimes those ancient sculptures that we're talking about here are like showing the family like trying to like
Mhm.
explain to you like the importance of like this thing that we might not understand or maybe we translate it differently but like
Mhm.
it's deeper it's more of a I can't believe we're going to use this word it's more of a connection than 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 just portraying a scenery or,
Mhm.
using monotone
Mhm.
color like, a one color and very
Yes, and there's,
you know
like,
what I
so much
mean?
symbolism in, like, where they place the arm and, like, what direction is somebody looking, it's like those will be
Yeah.
very deeply and they can be very significant in, like again, a modern painter can have a specific reason for having it,
Yes.
but it but it's just within the context of that
Yeah.
time, and, like, I've noticed when you read a lot of the plaques and when I go through the museums a lot too, like, especially just because I like, with Egypt, because I've always just every time I go to the museums, I'm always like, "Egypt, Egypt, Egypt," like, I wanna see it every time, and,
Yeah.
like, it's interesting to me how much I think they leave out the, like, spiritual significance of these things to the people of the culture, like, I feel like a lot of the
Mhm.
not three-dimensional aspects are not really talked about as much or explained what the real significance of these things are, because I know that there's just a deeper significance that is not being told, in the
Yeah.
museum plaques. And like I also feel like there's this narrative, and I sure it's true maybe on some levels, but I feel like what they're always saying with like all these cultures is like they made this big castle, they made this big monument to like show how powerful this king is, and that's what they say for like every single thing. And it's like, do you really like, and like it's, to me that's almost taking your very western perspective and like putting this on an ancient culture, because you don't
Yeah.
necessarily know why they are creating these things, or like what is the significance of these things. And like
Yeah, things like
I don't know,
that.
it's just very interesting to me.
Yeah, things like that took so much time back then. So, like, it was every single little detail
Mhm,
meant something. Like, there wasn't a, "Oh, it just needs to be a wall to fit a standard." No, there was, like, a
mhm.
reason why I had, I'm just thinking the word that's coming to me right now is trivets. Like, I don't know why that word is coming to me. Like, there's a reason why there's so many of them, you know what I mean? Like, or
Yes.
the windows were placed in a way because they knew that that's where the light came
Mhm.
in the morning, so that's where they could get ready in the
Yes.
morning. Like, certain things like that was really thought out because it just took so much longer. Whereas now, you know, a Western thought is we all live in tiny little boxes that all look the same. Like, like that line from
Mhm.
Weeds, like that's in the Weeds trail like song, like
Oh, yes, yeah, yeah.
tiny
Yeah,
little
yeah, yeah.
boxes in a row. Like they're all the same. They don't
Mhm.
think about where the window goes. And homes
Right.
were a sculpture. Like that was even thought
Mhm.
out. Like, so, like, that's just talking about the architecture, and we're talking about art, but every single little thing back then was thought
Mhm.
out. And I think that artists still do think about every single detail, but maybe it's on a different spectrum. Like, I know plenty of artists
Yeah.
that do it by emotion or like some spiritual
Mhm.
guidance or like, various other reasons. But I just feel like
Yes.
when you're talking further back in time, it's just everything took so much longer because there wasn't technology the same as here, or there was alien
Mhm.
technology if we're
Or
talking about
yes,
Egypt.
I was gonna
So,
say that we
I
know
mean, there is also that,
of.
but that's a different type of art in a whole different way. I don't know.
Mhm.
But I just feel like
Mhm.
everything either took so much longer or they had so much more advantages that we somehow lost and are regaining in a slower way.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, art history has always been very fascinating to me for many, like, just for many reasons, but, like,
Mhm.
it is very interesting when you learn about all these different eras and periods, and, like, there's definitely periods of human history where it did become, like, of I feel like the most ancient structures, it's very symbolic, it's very spiritual. You cannot separate the spiritual aspects
Yeah.
from the physical aspects of it. And then you kind of get to a point in art where it does become very like only dimensional, like like I'm literally
Yeah.
only painting a thing as well as I can paint a thing for it to look like the thing. And
Yeah.
then now I feel like then you kind of have a reemergence with, I feel like a lot of modern art brings it into the psyche where it's like, and I was thinking about this the other day, where it's like the the paintings, or like I'm think about like Picasso. It's like we know that like an abstract art and all these things, it's like, and really all these different forms of modern art, like the cubism and pointillism and all these things, like it's portraying the thing, but it's almost more portraying the different ways that a mind can perceive something internally, that in the way that like your internal reality is different from the plain three-dimensional thing. So it's like, you know what I mean? Is
Yeah.
that like
Yeah,
a
yeah,
good
yeah,
way to
yeah.
explain
No, I
that?
I understand what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, so it's more like it's almost like like this art is showing you how I see the world in my head
Yeah. Yeah.
thing, but we don't see it the same in our heads. We don't interpret things the same way. And so I don't know, that was, like, definitely something that came to me when I was, like, going through the museum, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah," like, I feel like I get more and more modern art as I grow up.
Yeah,
But,
well,
like,
as
I
you
feel
get
like
older.
before it's just like, "What the fuck is this?" Like, what like, you painted a canvas white, and now you're selling it for $1,000,000, and, like, sure, that happens too, and I don't think that that's but then the point of that is, like, we're questioning what is art, and, like, if I
Yeah,
can sell that shit, then that's like, so there's just, like,
yeah,
a lot of layers to it, but
yeah. Art
anyway.
is one of those things that's subjective for sure. Like, that's the whole point of
Very.
it. But I do think that some artists are intentional about the thought that you are supposed to get from their art, and some are
Mhm.
just leading you. Like, they're just, like, letting you
Yeah.
think for yourself, you know? Um,
Mhm.
and I feel like in the particular art, which has got us on this conversation, is ancient art. I feel like that is usually trying to send a message because that's what they've been doing with us for years. Like, I mean, all of the
Mhm.
as long as we know, there's been some sort of outside, like, connections that there's no way to speak it, like, make sense of it without it being trying to send a message, you know what I mean?
Mhm. Yes, it's like a message and like I feel like many ancient things too are like recording things. Like they want you to know what happened here. They want you to know
Yeah.
this thing and that this is significant and what this means and like it's very interesting, but all that
I
to
love that you
say.
guys went as a family to an art exhibit. Like,
Mhm.
are you
Oh
guys
yeah,
all
my
into
family loves.
art?
Yeah, my family are just all I'm just we're all kind of nerds. Like we just love learning things. Like
No, I love
we
that.
like we enjoy like trivia. Like my dad watches Jeopardy like every single night. So like growing up, we would all like be answering Jeopardy questions and shit. And like my yeah, like I just like I love to read. Like my mom would
Yeah.
always read to us out loud growing up. So like every one of my siblings, like we enjoy reading. We always did really really well in school. Like I come from a nerdy family. Like I don't know how
No,
else
that's,
to say that.
my,
We all nerds, but like the cool kind.
my maternal aunt and her husband have 2 daughters, and they were, like, kinda, like, fill-in parents for me in my, like, adolescence to adulthood. Um,
Mhm.
and they, like you were saying, they watch Jeopardy every night. Like, they're super smart. Like, my cousins,
Mhm.
I have one that's they're both very smart before I even say anything. They're both extremely smart. One's in college and one's in high school, but one is a little bit more book and applied and, like, very on it,
Mhm.
and then the other one's just I think she's just more of a creative spirit, like, so, like, regular curriculum is just not her thing.
Mhm.
So, sorry about the technical difficulties, we are back.
We
One of
are
our
back.
computers was about to crash or die, so we had to do what was necessary so we could keep recording.
Yes.
I don't remember
Thank
where
you
we
for your
were at,
patience, lovely audience.
and I feel like we were
No.
kinda wrapping up, so if it was for the art because it
Yep.
was an art conversation
Yeah,
we
I was gonna
mostly
say
got
it
on
was
a tail
pretty
fin
much
on.
time for us to move topics anyway. We were going on with that for quite a bit.
Do we wanna just
Great
do a little
conversation though.
yeah, it was. Absolutely.
Yes, but I oh, the other thing that I did this week though is we went upstate for a little bit, which is nice, and like the service up there in the hills, it's like terrible. So it was almost like it felt really really nice to just I'm like, you know what? All right, I'm just gonna unplug from everything, be present with the fam, hang out in the nature. So, anyways, we went to like my favorite little crystal shop up there, and I got two oracle decks that were just like what, like they were like screaming to me, and they're both fairy decks.
Both of them?
So they're both fairy decks, and they both have art by Amy Brown. Do you know Amy Brown?
I feel like I know that name, but those are also very common names, so I might even know a real Amy a different Amy Brown. Like,
Yes, like if you've seen this art that looks like this is her art. This is just the one that was like
oh, it's
in
beautiful.
the deck with her.
I don't know if I have. It's gorgeous though.
She's a very well-known fair, like she draws a bunch of fairies and like dragons and mythical creatures, and I loved her art even when I was like in junior high school, like 5th grade, like that age range when like Quizilla was a thing. I remember that
Mm.
like there was just I had a whole phase of just like loving Amy Brown artwork, and so I go to this shop, and they had these oracle decks that have her artwork, and one of them is like authored by Nancy Brown, who is her mom, which I think is
Oh,
really cool.
wow.
Yeah,
That's
like her
so
mom is like a
special.
metaphysical healer, apparently. Right? Isn't that so cool? And then the other one is written by Lucy. I'm so sorry if I mispronounced his name, but Lucy Cavendish or Lucy Cavendish.
You'll
But
have to
this is
send me
like
the
this.
names and I'll
This is
tag
this
them.
one. Yes, it's beautiful. I was like so excited because and I swear that I manifested this too because like I feel like I was thinking like a year or two ago. I'm like, no, it would be so dope if like they had a whole deck of Amy Brown artwork, like specifically, because I feel like at the time I was looking through and there were like a few fairy decks and a few like fairy oracles, but I don't remember that this existed like when I thought about it. And maybe it did and I just didn't research, but or I just switched dimensions and into a parallel reality where this exists. Okay, one or the other.
I
I'm
like
just
all
saying,
of
I feel
those
like I manifested
options. So whatever
this.
one you decide is what feels right, let's go with it.
You know, I'm open. It could be any of them. So, anyways, this I was like reading through. She has a great write up like in the beginning of this that tells you about like different
Mm,
kinds of fairies and I love it so much. So I want to pull us a fairy blessing
yes.
card this
Do you want to
week
pull one from
for
each deck
everybody.
and kind of read about them?
Yeah, do we want to have like an extra? We could have an
Yeah,
extra. So
let's
yes,
do
that's
it.
the this is the fairy blessing cards, and then we have this fairy wisdom oracle deck. Do you see how beautiful
Ooh.
this is? Like, are you kidding me?
Ah, it's gorgeous. Oh my God.
It comes in
I
this
love the
like
colors.
beautiful like and the book, like the little book that tells you the oracle stuff is it's a hardcover book. Like this is like it's like a really nice set, and it was not like crazy expensive. Like I'm almost like, what? This was only like $26. Are you kidding me? It's beautiful. Okay, so the Fairy Wisdom Oracle is the one that was like written with her mom,
Okay.
and it's very cute. And then Lucy Cavendish is the one who wrote this fairy blessing card. So let's get a fairy. Do we want the wisdom or the blessing first?
Mm.
I feel like you might want to start with the wisdom and end with the
Yeah,
blessing.
you might want to. Yeah, I think you're right.
Now that I'm thinking about
I was like, I don't know. I feel like
it.
it's like the wrong kind of selfish when you do the blessing before the lesson.
Yeah, because it's just yeah. Like wait, I feel like blessing is supposed to be at the end.
Yeah.
It just happened to be the deck I was shuffling first, but dun, 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 dun. Okay. So our fairy wisdom. Ooh, it's beautiful. It's called the source of magic.
Ooh. Ooh. I
It's almost
love
like a
that.
mermaid fairy, and she has four arms, or it's two, or it's a mermaid and a fairy in front of each other.
Oh, I think that's I feel like it looks like
I think it's one
those
picture
arms
though,
belongs to her.
right? It just looks like
Or
one being with four arms, right?
yeah. Wow.
She has like a little mermaid tail, and it's number 26, so that's an 8.
Okay.
The
I like
source
this.
of magic.
Yes.
Ooh,
Beautiful.
that's hot.
Wow. I love that deck.
Y'all, I'm telling you, like this artwork is mesmerizing. Like as a kid, I would just stare at this, like what we were just talking about with the museums.
Yeah.
Like I would just sit in my room and be like, whoa, like it's so beautiful.
So
So
we'll
wow,
sandwich the card
26.
that fell out for me
Hmm.
when I was shuffling mine a little bit ago, while you shuffle your next deck, if you want.
Yes,
Do you wanna read about that one first, actually? Do you wanna read
sure.
about
Oh,
what it means?
wait, this is fucking crazy because
Okay,
it just
now
popped out.
Okay, yes,
while I was shuffling.
do it.
No, but okay, the second one that popped out is also number 26, and it's a similar colors of they are not all this color, but they have very similar color, like wings. It has like the blues.
What?
And this one is called 26, The Blessing of Mothers.
Wow. That's also beautiful. Holy my god. She's an incredible artist.
Yes.
I love the gowns and the wings. Oh my gosh. I can't
Right?
wait for
It's
you
just
to
like
send me
it's
the pictures of
mesmerizing,
these because I'm gonna stare
right?
at them.
Yes, because make sure you're following us on Instagram because you will get the pictures posted every week of our cards that we're pulling.
Yes.
We'll do like little write-ups about what everything means. Oh my gosh. Wait, I just can't. I'm in. Like they both came out as number 26, and
That's
they're both similar
crazy.
colors too.
Wow.
The fairies are with us. They say hello.
Well, I wish this was 26,
Whew.
but this was the 5 of wands,
Ooh.
and these are holographic tarot cards. Like, ooh.
Ooh. Huh.
So,
5 of Wands. That I feel like is all right because I feel like we have talked in past episodes about like the tower and how a lot of people are like get the tower and are like scared. But to me, I almost feel like the 5 of Wands is that's a tough one to try to find the bright
you
side
think
of
so?
sometimes.
I'm
It can be. I think that I mean I believe in
mhm.
finding the bright side in every situation, but I do feel like the 5 of Wands kind of like it's chaos. It's chaos, and it
It
often
yeah,
means
it
some
seems
kind of
like
conflict.
brutal chaos. Like,
Yes. Yeah, and it's just like to me, it's almost like a clashing of egos. It's when like you go like, "Grr, no, I'm right. No, I'm right." It's like that
none
to
of
me
that's
is like
welcome. None
five
of
of
that
Wands.
energy is welcomed here. We're not no, 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 no.
No.
I mean,
But also like with
yeah,
chaos comes change. So again, it goes with all the cards. It doesn't you can't
that was
have
that
one
was
thing
actually what I
without
was gonna say.
the
That was
other
actually what
side
I
of
was gonna
that, you
say
know.
was 5 to me always makes
Mhm.
me think of change because it's in the middle. Like
Mhm.
5, like
Yes, me
just in
too.
like okay, numbers. I love to do numbers sometimes. Like 5 is when you start to round up. That's when you start to think, "Oh, it's good. It's gonna be good."
Mm.
Like, yeah, it's at that weird area where you feel like you're not gaining enough of momentum, but you are way higher to that,
Mhm.
finish line than you were at 0, you know?
Right, it's like it's that kind of like
Yeah,
halfway there, like Wednesday hump day energy. But also like what's interesting to me too is like the shapes of the numbers can often look like what they mean. And like to me 5 looks like it looks like it's about to spin, like it is like it's a very motion filled number to me. And like doesn't 5 kind of look fiery too? Like it kind of looks like has a little bit of flame energy to it. So
because
and
it has a sharp edge
like
and a curve
it's like that
edge.
fire under your ass. It's gonna like
Is it because
you
yeah,
know. Yeah, because it's like it's just like yeah, and it just like I think I don't know. I don't even have a pen to like write what I mean, but like yeah, it's just to me like 5 it has kind of like a
yeah,
flame, fiery feel, and like 5 and fire are almost the same word minus one
yeah.
letter, you know. So
Also
yeah, like 5 has that kind of like fire, but it can be conflict if it's like you're being too hot headed, but it can also be like that just the power and the strength to
yeah,
get shit
yeah,
going, you know.
totally. I also think that's part of why we're here to kind of get change, get people to listen and connect things and stuff like that. And that's why we put
Catalyst.
our podcast at 5:55 in the morning, because it's the beginning of the day. That angel
Mhm.
number for change. Like so,
Mhm.
I know it's of wands, which is kind of like
Yes.
but I wouldn't have felt. like, much better if it was of swords either. I feel like those are both kinda so, you know,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't
the
necessarily
fives
wanna
is
cause conflict with
mhm.
anything that we say on this podcast, but I do think that change that
No.
comes from some conflict can, you know, be good and cause for a good cycle of evolution. So, that's the positive of it, I think.
Absolutely, and, like, yeah, like we have mentioned, it's like being light warriors, you are bound to have to be a little bit against the grain, and that's what we are out here, we're being ourselves, and sometimes that can make other people like feel conflicted, and it can make people be a little bit triggered, I think, sometimes if you are just coming from things from a certain perspective, but it's not. Sometimes that's exactly what's needed to kind of break
Yeah.
down that ego that wants to just like bash against other egos
Yeah,
mindlessly. You know what I
totally.
mean?
I would love to, even though I interrupted you with this card, but I would love to hear
Okay,
about those
let's.
cards. So, maybe there's something about this card that's going
Yeah, I
to
was gonna say let's
we'll
read.
be able to connect with your cards as well. So,
Yes, I was gonna
at
say
least
they
so
might
far,
like
we as
connect.
we've done these, it has always
We'll
kind
see
of
how everything
been that
connects.
way.
Yeah, and like already off the top, like these cards have so much blue and
Mm,
indigo and like purpley colors. So we're already talking about the throat chakra to me, third eye chakra, a little bit of crown chakra because this person even has like white hair. There's actually both cards have one of the characters in there has white hair, and that's like the crown chakra is violet, but it's also white. So we're definitely, I don't know, there's something here to me that like
mm,
connecting to the upper chakras. But the source of magic is the key word is manifestation. And this is the one that looks like a mermaid
mm.
fairy. Very beautiful.
That's funny.
Okay. And it says,
Yes.
story time with Frenchie.
Go, go, go. I'm excited.
Okay, so magic is not just for fairies. You also are a source of magic. Every time you inhale and exhale, you breathe in the energy of source. Whether you call it God, spirit, divinity, father, mother, it is the source of all that is.
Mm,
It resides in everything in our universe and within your own body. As a human being on earth, you are endowed with the gift of manifestation. Through your thoughts, visualization, feelings, and words, everything in your world you have thought into existence. Remember that what you focus on is what grows into manifestation. So be very careful of where you place your attention. Like the fairies, bring as much joy and love into your heart and life as you can. Open yourself to receive. Think positive thoughts. Transmute negative feelings and thoughts into positive ones. If a negative picture should appear in your mind, replace it with a picture of positive input. Soon you will see how things begin to shift as your life becomes happier and full of wonderful new changes. Always ask what you need to always ask that what you need be given is for your highest good. When something is for your highest good, then it is also the highest good for others. No harm will come to others through your request. If it is not for your highest good, then it will not happen and something better will replace it. You are the source of magic. You. And then all of them have a little chant and a little thing to do for the day. So it says, anybody at home wants to chant this and get your little fairy magic in your life, we're going to chant. It says, I replenish my body with the breath of spirit. I exhale in order that I may inhale again. My thoughts and words are clear and divinely inspired. I am open to receiving my good. I manifest all that is divinely possible for me, so be it. And then it says, make yourself a wand today.
mm.
It's going to be wands. It's going to be Ollivander out here crafting
Oh,
wands.
I love
So
that.
that is the source of
Oh,
magic.
I packed up
Very
a lot
cool.
of my altar, but one of the
Hmm.
things I left out is this little wand that Jeremy found when we were at summer camp several years ago, and just because you mentioned wands, I'm gonna show you because it's definitely something that is, like, made, like, has a couple crystals at the top.
Oh my gosh. I
weirdly
so
coincidental that
your
I actually
video is
kept this
like,
out. You mentioned that, but, um, yeah,
oh my gosh, that's so freaking beautiful though.
yeah,
Wait, what?
and then there's another
Is that
I
is
think
that
it's a
like a
citrine,
peachy color?
and then I'm not sure about this one, but this one is a
Oh,
greenstone. It may
oh,
be
that's
like an
beautiful.
emerald, or it may be
Mhm.
since we talked about wands, making wands, this is something I would
Perfect.
totally think would qualify as that assignment. So, for those of you that have no issues with
Absolutely.
this side of video, you have seen it now, and I will, post pictures with this particular
Mhm.
card when we share that card. How about that?
Wow. Yeah, that's exciting. So we want to be blessed by the
Yes.
fairies.
I love that wisdom card, though. That was a very,
Get
very good
blessed by the
card.
fairies. Very good card. I love it. I'm yeah, like I've been really just obsessed with these cards since I got them. So I'm glad that you
I feel
are
like
saving
that's a
them
very
too.
profound message to
So
kinda go with,
we got the
like,
blessing.
really why we're all here. Like,
Mhm.
focus on the good, like, that's
Mhm.
kinda what that card was. Life is what you make it. Manifestation in a nutshell right
Absolutely.
there.
You know what's cool about this card too? It has like the blessing of the mothers. This card is beautiful, and it doesn't.
I was
It has
gonna
like a
say that
yin yang
earlier.
kind of feel. Like half of it is the background is black, half of
Mhm.
it is white. We have one of them with white hair, one of them with black hair, one of them has light colored robes, the other one has a darker colored robe.
Is that
It's
like a moon
very,
that's behind them?
it's it really is.
Okay, yeah, I
Mhm. There's a
totally.
moon
Because at
behind
first,
them.
that moon was making the dark side not look all dark, but now I see that moon, and I can totally see the perfect
Mhm.
yin and yang. I was gonna say that earlier, but I was trying not to interrupt you too much like I'm doing right now. I love it though.
We love it.
The blessing of the mothers.
I feel like when our connection is better, like we're better at like being able to like put little things in and not like be talking on top of each other. But when it's hard when there's like even a slight lag, I think because it's like I'll think that I'm speaking in a dead space, but I'm speaking over you, and then it just everything goes crazy. It becomes five of wands chaos. Okay, so the blessing of the mothers, the fairy gift of a time of unexpected gifts and wonderful synchronicities. When this blessing comes to you, friends, you receive the blessing of the mothers, the ancient fairy beings of the land known today as whales. With this blessing comes recognition for your own kindness and generosity. And so now you will find yourself blessed with the unexpected gift. The old tales tell us that the mothers will reward those who are kind and caring, especially those who care for the land and
Mhm.
for the animals. And so, to you, they are sending a boon, a gift of treasure found in a hidden place, a warm cloak on a cold day offered by a stranger, money readily coming to you in strange and lovely ways, and ease of suffering in an area you thought held no hope. The blessings of the mothers are unpredictable, as they will see your own life, and what they will bring to you is what your soul most needs to feel solace and blessings. If you have felt like there has been a run of bad luck, this will now lift and transform into an effortless flow of all that is good. Every small kindness you have offered others will now flow back to you, and in mysterious ways, you will see how what was once done out of simple goodness is now returning to you threefold. For the fairies see you, know you, and acknowledge your heart, and the mothers are now with you to bring you the Bendith e Mama, the gifts of the mothers. So when they appear, give thanks and know that nothing goes forgotten and unseen in the realm of the enchanted ones. Blessings, and may the gifts of the mothers bring you comfort and
Oh,
goodness,
that's
friends.
so beautiful. I'm, like, getting emotional.
Because whales, wait, can we explain your connection to whales? Because I just think this is like the
Whales?
coolest thing
I don't think
ever.
I have a connection to whales. Wait, what are you talking about?
I thought you have a
I don't
connection to
think
whales.
so.
Weren't you saying that you had in your bloodline there
Oh,
was a
whales,
Welsh
like, oh my
royalty?
gosh, I'm a bonehead. I thought you were talking about the animal, whales.
Wait, oh.
Okay, sorry, bonehead moment
No,
here.
Wales, like, it's
Yes,
the card is
the
the card is talking
land
about,
of Wales.
the
I
country.
got you, okay. Yeah, my,
Yes.
yes, you
So
did.
I did get that right. I
No, no,
wasn't,
no,
like,
you did.
completely
So
ruining your
sorry.
family's
I
history.
everyone laugh at me. I am a little
You're like, "Wales? What is Wales?
oh,
No, I don't have a
okay,
connection with
yes.
Wales. What are you talking about? Oh, yes, wait, I am Welsh
Yeah.
royalty, by the way." Just casually like, "Oh, yeah, I
I don't
almost
know that
forgot."
royal family. Um, yes, so my, on my mother's side, my grandmother who passed away a couple years ago was like what she was my mom, like the one that really kind of took care of me when I was really little and periodically stepped in and stuff. So like she was my everything.
Mhm.
Um she told us only a few months before she passed away that she is descendant from Welsh royalty. And we were like, "You waited all this time to tell us this? Like, what?" Like, that would have been cool to know. So
Oh
I've
my
actually that's
gosh.
one thing that I do want to once I settle down, I wanna, like, kinda try to do some sort of, like, I don't know, ancestry.com or something where I can, like, figure out exactly what bloodline it is and all of that. So
Mhm.
when I get there, I will happily share that journey when I on the
Yeah.
podcast. But yes, Welsh royalty. So I don't know. I haven't
Oh
really
my god.
um, really explored all that too much yet. So I started to read The Wild Magic, I
Mhm.
think is the name of that book that we did for book club a few months back. I
Mhm.
haven't finished it because I've been so busy. So, but every time I get to open it up, it takes me to a whole
Mhm.
nother place. Like it's just exactly like very fairy heavy, very fairy heavy.
Yes,
So
you
I've
can
always
feel
been
it.
like, "Oh, that's
Yes,
interesting." So I
yes.
didn't realize how intertwined fairies were to like that area. Um, so I'm interested.
Mhm.
I'm excited to get into like learning about that a little bit. So I've always loved fairies, but now it makes sense a little bit. But yeah.
Yes, it's like you're now you get to connect it. Were you a kid who like was into that stuff as a child? Like were you into
Mm,
fairies when you were younger and like elves and
I
fantasy
mean,
lands
I
and
think so. So I grew up kind of religious, like I mentioned that a little bit. And
Mhm.
I feel like a lot of that stuff was like not allowed to be talked about, but like eventually some things got softened. So like
Mm.
I read Harry Potter books, and so I went more that route, like witchy stuff. But I do remember as a kid, like Peter
Yes.
Pan, like that was one of my favorite movies. Like one of them. I had a lot of favorite movies as a kid, but like I loved that. Like Tinkerbell was one of my favorite characters in that movie, of course.
Mhm.
Like just that it's just the magicalness of it all has always been interesting to me. But I don't know if I
Mhm.
was really allowed to like explore that to like the depths when I was at that
Yeah.
age where I probably would have like obsessively,
Yes.
you know.
Mhm. Yeah, I totally get that because it's like if the possibility is not even put before you, if it's like not even okay to think about something, you're just already cut off from that. It's like people told you that fairies weren't real before you had the chance to believe in
Yeah,
them in the first
exactly.
place.
Exactly,
Type
totally.
thing.
But like now, like I'm at
Mhm.
the impressionable
Yes,
age
that
of
is
31 and I'm like anything is possible. Like
yes.
like I want to learn about it. Let's learn about it.
You're like, see, but that's like the beautiful thing. I feel like that's the beautiful thing about like spiritual awakening and all that stuff. It's like you get to reawaken your inner child. You get to re experience like possibilities in the universe, and that, oh shit, like all these things that I thought was not real because I had to be an adult, it's like, no wait, this is dead ass real, and I get to be a witch, and I get to be a fairy,
Yeah.
and I get to like experience all these things, but even cooler than when I was a kid, because when I was a kid I like loved fairies, but I didn't necessarily like, yeah, like everything around me was telling me that this is a make believe thing, and I'm just having fun and playing pretend with my friends by like having a fairy tea
Yeah.
party and all these things. But now I'm like, oh shit, we were dead ass communing with fairies. Like, yes, we
Yeah.
were.
Yeah. Every time kids talk about that kind of stuff, I'm always just like, "Tell me about it." Like, I'm not gonna stifle it, I wanna hear about it. So, like,
Yes,
I love that. I
yes,
think we have a lot to learn from kids because they're just a lot more receptive than, we are,
mhm,
because we kinda, like, stop
mhm,
those sensors from being able to be, like, open and able to
mhm.
take in that energy and that frequency, because I think it's, like,
Yes,
just like
yes, like our conditioning has shut us off.
yeah. Yeah, I was just gonna say, like,
Mhm. And
it's almost like our frequencies, we, like, shut them off, and that's how we get in the lower frequencies, but when you're a kid, you're just at, like, that highest vibe, like, they really have all of their sensors
mhm.
open and on.
Yes, like imaginary friends, quote unquote, imaginary friends, like so common. Like, yeah, with all of these things, and how many young kids like remember their past lives and all that kind of stuff. But then you get to a certain age, and somehow your psychic gets turned off, and somehow like you forget about those dreams that you used to have, and then it's like you do kind of go into that sleep mode, and then some of us are kind of fortunate, I guess, to be able to wake up and remember that that's real. But some people never go back to that
Yeah,
reality again. You know?
yeah. I feel like that's how we get this.
Yeah, we
I feel
got
like that's
fairies.
why we get this.
Mhm.
Is because there is that divide of people that are open and receptive because they are having their spiritual awakening, and then there's the other people that
Mhm.
it's not that they're doing anything wrong, they're just not tapping in on the same frequencies as these other group of people, and it's causing a clash, and that can be in various ways on all sorts of spectrums, and I
Mhm.
think that's where this card comes into play. Like, is that collision
Mm.
of
Mhm.
acceptance of the unknown and the I know everything.
Yes. Yes. Yes, and it's interesting because I feel like many people again like would believe in aliens, and because that's like science. Some
Mhm.
people will say it's science fiction, but they still have like there's still some kind of
Right.
like scientific thing. But then you get into like fantastic realms, and, like, fairies and dragons, and there's people again. That's a whole other realm of clash, because it's like to me it makes sense that all of these things are real, and I can explain the way that I perceive things, but there's many people who believe that like fairies are crazy to believe in, but aliens like obviously they exist. So like that's a whole nother thing too, where I'm like, you could be awake but then still not believe in certain
Oh,
things. That's
yeah,
very interesting to me as
totally.
well.
I think it's because there's some
Hmm.
sort of explanation for, like vision,
Right.
like, I don't know, like, there's just some sort of, like, connection to an actual thing that we have an overall belief in, and then you have something that's maybe not of this world
Hmm.
right now, but used to be and was very prevalent, and the energies of those things are still in existence, but they're just not visibly on our plane, or you know what I mean? So, like, it's
Mhm.
harder to wrap their brain around this. So, yeah, I
Yes,
totally
or
see
as
how there's,
much.
like, a acceptance of this and
Mhm.
an unacceptance of this because one can be connected to math and one's connected to
Mhm.
creativity, or so
Right.
it seems.
It's very interesting. But then to me again, and that I feel like we've talked about this before too, but then it's like when we talk about aliens, when we talk about the galactics, it's like to me you can't separate that from the spiritual and the
Yeah.
metaphysical aspects, but people will still try to do that. Like they'll believe in aliens, but only like three-dimensional aliens that you can see with your eyes and you can see through a telescope. And it's like that to me is just leaving out a lot of the
Mhm.
picture, you know?
But I mean, in a weird way, I feel like our history does the same thing to human species itself as your comparison of that. Because
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
we only
Yeah. I feel like that's
right,
part of the
like we
conditioning, right?
only history is becoming borderline subjective now, like because we rewrite certain things or to keep things out, and that in a way
Yes.
falsifies our history. And so to a lot of degree there's
Hmm.
some unknown as just about us as humans because maybe that just didn't align with someone's theory, so we had
Hmm.
to dispute that.
Yes. Like the way that history is framed to us is highly subjective. And I remember learning from one of my wonderful teachers growing up, like one of the things I remember like my history teacher saying is like history is written by the conquerors. Like that's a common phrase here. Like the perspective of what we look back upon has widely been shaped by the perspective of the people who
Mhm.
won the war, by the people who, and usually those were the people who with a certain type of, more often than
Right.
not, fucked up ideology, who were oppressing a lot of people. And like the voice of the oppressed, I think now a lot of historians have been going back, and especially in these like past more recent years, and reshaping narratives of groups that did not have their voice heard and throughout history. And I think that that is part of, again, like, oh, and I'm getting so much chills as I'm saying this, like the rise of the divine feminine,
Mm, the
um,
truth.
through this narrative that has been like shaped. Yes, and there's just these deeper truths that were hidden in plain sight often. Again, because it can be dead ass right on a piece of ancient manuscript or artwork, but the plaque is saying things from a very specific perspective. And like people will go to the museum and read the plaque, but not think about the deeper things that are not being talked
Mhm,
about in the plaque.
mhm.
You know what I mean? So cosmic connect that back to the
Yeah,
beginning of
there
our
we go.
conversation.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, I totally I
yeah.
I totally agree with you. I think that there is definitely a deeper passion for discovering the truth, and there's also different cultures that are finally willing to integrate this side and this side, and then you get a little bit closer to the full
Mhm.
picture. But I feel like some of that is just still so new.
Mhm.
So there's still a lot of false narratives out there, and we as humans have still not learned from our history because it's just not all together. It's like we have like all these separate little pieces that
Mhm.
don't make one like a whole picture because everybody's holding on to their side, like um but yeah, I feel like
Mhm.
that is something that is a big um parallel to how it is with the aliens as well as the fantasy side of things with like the fairies and things. I think that that's a very common
Mhm.
thing of we accept this part but this part isn't, and it's like we're not willing to put it all together. It's kind of back to that whole why we want to connect everything because you put it all together and it makes more
Mhm.
sense. But when it's all separate, this is why we're so all
Yeah.
over the place with explaining things because it's just like it's not all together. You can't you can't explain it all in one.
Yeah. Yes, and to me, I'm thinking of like divide and conquer, like is not just done on a physical level of like it's done to our
Mhm.
consciousness, is done to these like these realms of understanding where it's like if you can compartmentalize these things so much, and you can put school here and this subject here and this subject here and in actual different parts of your brain to not be able to connect these things, it's like there's just questions that are very valid questions that you're never going to ask. You're just going to assume that this is the way that things are because this is what I was told, or this was the general like narrative that people say, where this is what the museum plaque said, or this is what this main history textbook said. But I think that there's a lot of great work going on that has been going on for quite some time, and I think it's just becoming more prominent.
Yeah.
As far as like just looking at these things from different perspectives and making these different connections, and what does this art piece really mean, and what does this, you know, I don't know, what does this ancient manuscript really mean, and all that type of stuff is like that's what lights me up inside is learning about those things and being like, oh shit, it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah, same. That's exactly why we got along so quickly. It's just because like we both are so passionate about like just making things connect. I don't know why. I don't know why we are like this.
Mhm.
Obviously, it's all of the reasons of why
Mhm.
we came into this world when we did and the forms that we did, but um, it's
Mhm.
just it's so fascinating to me to make it all connected. I get so like wigged out when something like, oh
Yes.
shit. Like,
Mhm. Mhm. And like, yes, again, because when like I believe that I'm a fairy, like I definitely have fairy blood, and I also am galactic, and I also and like again, this is something that could be so separate to people and be like, you're freaking nuts. Like, how are you an alien and a fairy? But then I look it up and I'm like, is this crazy? But then actually, fairies love Andromeda. Like fairies, like it's a thing. Like a lot of fairies love to incarnate on Andromeda. It's like a very beautiful kind of like bioluminescent type of stuff going on in Andromeda. There's like a deep, deep connection to nature that the fairies on Earth are very much in charge of, and there's there's a fairy for every plant. There's guardian fairies, and of all every element, every living thing has a fairy associated with
yeah.
it, and it's very cool. Like I definitely feel like I've been having this like fairy awakening too. It's like the same way that we have like a
Mm.
starseed awakening. I've just been getting a lot deeper into like my fairy roots and what that really means, because a lot of that narrative has been changed or colored or just completely left out of history as well, where fairies have turned into this fantastical little thing that is like, oh, just a fun little ha 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 thing, that's very fun to put in like kids movies and is totally an imagination thing. But if you look at the history,
There's
there's a
both
much
sides.
much deeper history to all of that, and it's very connected to our bloodlines as well, because like Wales and Ireland, which I have a lot of Irish um, in me, so it's just very interesting how everything is really connected.
Sorry, I breathed in my saliva there. Um, I
This is why I love this show, because it's like we'll be talking about the deepest things, and then
um
you're like, yeah, just
I
talking about
feel like
saliva.
the other thing is it's just to be a different perspective here because I always like to paint different pictures. I don't think this is how I believe
Mhm,
necessarily, but I feel like there's also parallels with different things. Like, for instance, we've talked back on the episode where we did Palladians, and there's a lot of times that there's a connections with them and
mhm,
angels, right? And angels is a
mhm,
fantasy character that is embraced by a lot more people than other fantasy characters,
mhm.
but um it,
Well, because to many people, an angel
right,
is a religious thing, so it makes
right,
sense that that's a spiritual thing. But a fairy
right.
is a
But
big thing.
what I was going to allude to was with that parallel,
Mm,
who says that
mhm,
a witch in our human dimension now, today, or in the last couple hundred, 300, 700 years, whatever. Like, how come a witch and a fairy couldn't be parallel? Or how come, an alien wasn't something like that? So, like, just to be like going on a different side of like what you believe and how the fairies go in Andromeda, which I
Mhm.
hear you and I think that's very interesting. I would love to read stories about that. But on a totally
Mhm.
different side, just to kind of be there to paint a picture for somebody else that's just like, yeah, whatever, Frenchie. Like, there's also could be parallels with these different creatures, like as far as fantasy to things that are a little bit more digestible and tangible to us now. Like, I feel like a lot of people are coming around to witches being a thing because we have witch talk and like there's all kinds of witch Instagrams and various things where there's definitely a popularity to it right now. Aliens have always had some sort of
Mhm.
popularity to it, and fairies have a different,
Mhm.
and for some reason is always put in a child category like you said. But who is to say that any of these things are not synonyms of each other? Do you know what I mean?
Right. I think that there's just like there's definitely
Yeah.
a lot of overlap, and but it's also, yeah, like you're saying, it's very interesting because they all just have very distinctive like ways that people connect to that energy and ways that people conceptualize of those things. And like witch to me is interesting too because like witches, every like even a scholar knows that
Right.
witches are real, that like you can point to history and find evidence that people were practicing witchcraft. But then there's people but people will still just say, oh, but like it was just like they're just doing, not like it's the magic, I think, that people won't believe in. And then I feel like fairies is different because it's like people believe that people know that people always talked about fairies, but then people don't, like a lot of people will say that fairies are like were never real. It was just always an imagined thing. Whereas witches, they'll be like, oh yeah, but like witches were real, but their magic just wasn't real.
I
It was just
feel like
made
when
up
I was like
like
I agree with
things and
you
didn't
about
make
these.
sense
I agree with you
scientifically,
about these separations of these, but I feel like when I was a kid, because witches
Mhm.
and fairies weren't really allowed to be in my, world. I thought those things
Mhm.
like witches could
Mhm.
call on fairies and like they were like intertwined. Like cause it was all like
Mhm.
fantasy was
Yes.
just all one thing and all these things I wasn't allowed to learn about or explore were all in the same like thing because that's what they do in libraries, you know what I mean? Like they lump them all
Mhm.
together. So as a kid,
Mhm.
that's like how I thought
And in
everything
movies
was. Like it's
too,
just like
yes.
all the fantasy and
Mhm.
all these things that I'm not allowed to believe in are all in this world that I'm not allowed to go to.
Mhm.
So that's why I'm saying like
Yes,
until
and like
you really
yeah.
deep dive into things like, you and I have about some of this stuff and I think that you having such deep connections and
Mhm.
being drawn to them, I think you have more understanding than even I do about fairies. Like I was saying, I haven't deep dived into these things, but I've always kind of had like a peak interest in the magical creatureness of it all. But I feel like so
Yes.
often these things are so misunderstood. So if it makes you like understand it until you can
Mhm.
like deep dive into these things a little more, like we have, maybe just imagine them in their own little world together. And it's just this magical world because it's kind of a beautiful moment to think of it that way.
Yes, it's the fairy realm is also like, well, because they are all beings that exist in
Yeah.
higher dimensions where it's a higher baseline frequency. And that's why fairies are very in between type of creatures. And so they can flit into our world and become manifest in like the third dimension, but their realm is, but again, they hid themselves because they have a very there's a very dark past with fairies. They tried to eradicate fairies. um, it's very sad, actually. Like, fairy history is very sad, and I think that many fairies alive today have carry a deep sorrow, just as there's like a
Oh
witch
yeah.
wound for many witches because they have been so when I'm getting chills again, but like just just because witches were burned at the stake and all of these things and extricated from society, like fairies had a very similar thing, and I believe there's just a very deep fairy wound,
Totally.
um, which is again, it's very interesting. I almost feel like it's like a separation that was created of like there's the light side of the fairy, which is like known and shown on TV, and like this what's happened to witches as well, like you were saying. So there
Yeah.
is so much parallel and there is so much overlap where it's like, because witches will be shown on like Disney and all these things in the same way that fairies
Yeah.
can be shown on in Disney and all these things. Like we are just fun little witches doing our cauldron thing, but then if you actually look in history, there were serious things that were being done to these groups, and there's a lot of sadness, there's a lot of pain there that I think that we kind of are here to transmute
I think
partly,
I think the biggest
in order for our own soul's evolution and just to,
yeah.
you know.
I think the biggest example of
Hmm.
that is just look at our planet. Fairies are all about the nature. Like that's
Hmm.
why every time you see fairies usually
Hmm.
depicted, whether they're depicted
Yeah.
evil or happy, they are evil or good. Like I don't know why I picked
Hmm.
happy. Um,
Hmm.
evil or
Evil or
happy.
happy.
Because obviously evil people aren't happy. Um,
You
their
can't be
land's
happy
always
and
depicted
evil.
lush and very, full of just growth and abundance of just
Hmm.
plants and nature. And now there's so much
Yeah.
civilized, like we've made cities and we've kind of gone away from nature. And there are people in this country that think
Yes.
food comes from grocery stores and don't realize that it comes from our world, like from our planet. Like our planet feeds
Hmm.
us. And
Yes.
that is such an incredible disconnect. And I think that that's just shows
Hmm.
how much the fairies like hurt, because look at it. I mean, I'm sitting in a
Hmm.
box right now that is not
Yeah, like
something a
you
fairy
can't.
would want me to be in.
Yeah, you can't disconnect. Like fairies and nature are
Yeah.
intrinsically connected, and um, just as you were saying, it's definitely a different kind of world and a different kind of climate, and the fairies do have strong messages and a lot of energy to lend to people in order to help the environment, in order to help the earth, in order to reconnect these things and um, reawaken our inner wild side, our true connection to nature, and bringing that back. And I love what you were saying. It's freaking true, and it reminds me of like something I just recently remembered. Is like I remember as a kid, like going to my mom and being like, "Yo, know it's funny? The word chicken is the same as the word chicken. Like the word chicken for what I eat is the same as the word chicken of what I learn of like the barn animal." And then she's like, it's like the same thing, right? And I'm like, what? Like, I didn't know. I didn't know till I was like at some point in elementary school. Like I was still a kid, but like I didn't
Oh.
grow up knowing from the time of my childhood that like that the meat that we eat is animals. I didn't put
Oh,
that
really?
together. And I was like, oh my
Wow.
gosh. Like I didn't know. No, like because I was like, no, I was like, no, it's such a coincidence that the word chicken that I'm eating right now is the same word of chicken that I learned
Oh
about
my
in my
gosh.
barnyard, like
I'm not
teacher
laughing
Buck
at you. I just think that you're
goes
so
bop
adorable
bop,
that like well, it's because you grew up in a city, right? Like you never really like lived out in the country.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah.
Yeah, see, I could see
I
why
didn't
that would
know, but
be
and like it's so funny. It is very funny, and like yes, and it's very silly. But then when I think about the deeper implications of that, it's exactly what you're saying, where it's like, oh my gosh, like we can literally like people can be fed any freaking thing like and have no idea,
yeah,
like and there may be people who know like this is a good food or not a good food to eat, but like overall there's like so much control that
right.
different corporations, different people have by just like shaping the narrative of like the information that we have available, and like just masking the names of these chemicals and these products that are going
Yeah.
into all this food and stuff like
Yeah.
that, you know. Yeah, all of that is
Remind
very
me,
real.
like,
So
you're vegan, right?
I'm
Vegetarian.
a vegetarian. I like lean vegan when I can, but I'm
Okay.
not like strict about the vegan part.
Um, because like I guess I would say like flexitarian. I eat a lot of vegetarian and vegan meals, but I still eat meat.
Mhm.
But I usually strive for getting locally sourced meat. Jeremy grew up on a farm, and
Mhm.
used to like have connections to farms
That's
as a kid.
great.
Like there was a period of time where I lived at a distant family member's house that they were a farm, and so like I knew that chickens came from a farm and like that's how you had chickens. Now, the
You're like, I knew
thing
that chickens
that
were
I
chickens.
didn't know, and this was something that I didn't learn until I was an adult, was I didn't know that all chickens weren't treated the same. I didn't know there was such a thing as factory
Right.
farming and like how animals were treated or subjected to such terrible living
Yes.
conditions because I always knew that there was a farm because I lived on one for a little bit.
Mhm.
So I just thought all, you know, meat that's at the grocery store is being sourced by these local animals to like I just thought there was like that's why they all grew that. Like I thought that's why people did
Mhm.
cattle raising was because
Yeah,
they
like
took care of the grocery
yeah.
stores in the area. I didn't realize that there's a varying array of
Mhm.
things that people farm for. Like, and when I learned that, like in a
Yeah.
different way of not realizing that you're eating animals, in a different way, I was horrified to see how some animals are treated because I wouldn't have ever bought those things if I knew that. You
Mhm.
know, I would have much rather have gone without eating those meals that had meat in them than an animal be treated that way. You know, so like now I do know that knowledge and now I do
Mhm.
use my power of money to buy the things that I want to be available so that I don't have to contribute to those things. But I'm only one person. And so, you know, there's not an argument
Mhm.
for that in a vegan world if you're doing it just purely on the animals. Like, you know, because in my world, I grew up farm life, you know, you raised what you needed and then you had it butchered and then that was there to provide for your family for that year. That doesn't sound like a bad thing. That's going back to our
Mhm.
roots of hunting and gathering, you know? So, and that sort of thing, as long as
Mhm.
you're using all of the animal, you're being ethical about it. Like, I think there's a big difference in that type of eating than going
Exactly.
to the grocery store and just
Yeah.
buying whatever and not even understanding where it comes from and knowing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, like because also like to me there's also a big difference of like, you know, if you're living from the land and you again like if you're hunting for animals and things like that, like if you're going with like the local food and all these things that it's coming from the land again, as I said, that's very different from even if you're vegan, you can be eating so much like processed
Yeah.
like weird stuff that's like not meat, but it's still not necessarily like good for you. So like sometimes I wonder like you kind of have
Mhm.
to weigh your options of like, and not to say you can be very vegan and not eat
Right.
any like
It's
of those
way more
types of things
work
either,
in
but
our
like I definitely feel like there's a gradient of you know, I believe in everyone's like sovereignty to, you know, just have the diet
yeah.
that works for them. And like I think that people are vegan or vegetarian for like many different reasons, and there are many reasons why you may not be even if you would like to be. And like so I do respect everybody's right to like eat what they need to eat. But I definitely agree with you too, where it's like the I think that we can all pretty much agree that like factory
Yeah,
farming
no,
is not
absolutely.
it. And you know, like I mean, we can have a
Yeah,
whole other
we
episode
could.
about
I
all
was
this
just trying to
because
make
I feel like we both like
yeah, yeah.
can go into it a lot. But
I
yeah,
definitely just feel like
hmm
that disconnect from our land is what got us on this tangent, and I think that that is
Mhm.
a big,
Yes.
it's a big reason why a
Very
fairy
relevant.
would be here, is
Mhm.
to get us back in touch with the land, because that's their, like, I feel like that's their, they understand that we are
Mhm.
from it and we, like, they are us, and you know what I mean? Like, they give us life and
Yes. Yes. Like fairies are almost like the earth embodied in like this weird is like very
yeah.
cool, like magical, mystical way. And like fairies and humans have always been connected, and there has been a disconnect between fairies and humans. And I think that is, yes, that in itself is a major thing to be reconnected, and through that also connecting both groups back to the earth, and back to a way of harmony, and back to a way of love and bliss, and again, like, yeah, manifesting the positive things, like how the source of the of magic card is like saying when you're what you're focusing on is what you're creating, so like we can create together a better world where, you know, everything's more cosmically
Yes.
connected.
Yeah, and I would love to, do you said there was a connection between aliens and fairies as well? Was that what you said earlier? I can't remember if you were saying there was parallels or if there was
Well, the
actual
connection to me is
connection.
that like,
Oh, because they go to Andromedon.
well, like
What
I
was
said,
the
yeah, like fairies, there's like the way that like there's earth fairies, but then in the same way that like there's elementals and fairies and different like creatures of earth, there's also fairies that are that on other planets. And so there's like Andromedan fairies, and like fairies from here can travel to Andromeda, but then there's also fairies that are like on Andromeda. And again, thinking about the dimensionality, because we are thinking from a three-dimensional perspective, but when you're in the higher dimensions, like there's telepathic connections there, like all of these different groups are just connected in different ways from like what we can
Mhm.
completely understand, I feel. And so like, anyways, like the fact that many of the galactic groups that we're talking about are exist like solely in higher dimensions at this point, and as do fairies, but fairies are kind of like, again, in between, because they have been physical, they can be physical, they can flip to that. But same thing with
Mhm.
aliens, where aliens will be in higher dimensions and you wouldn't be able to see them three-dimensionally, but then they can like show themselves as like
Mhm.
apparitions of light bodies and things like that. So all that to say, like aliens know about
Yeah.
fairies, fairies know about aliens. There's dragons and fairies are also
Yeah, I
very
was
interconnected, and dragons can exist in different galactic realms. So all that to say, it really is all connected, and it really makes sense that all of these things exist, and not just fairies, but also like beings from other realms, from other cultures.
yeah.
And like I was just reading how the jinn, for example, like the jinn from certain cultures are like are also in the same realm of the fairies, but it's almost like
Yeah.
how the fairy realm can appear differently in different cultures, almost how there's like different just different civilizations, there's just different forms of fairies throughout the world too. And it's very cool. Like I almost want to learn about like the
Of fairies.
anthropology
That would actually,
of
I was
different
just going
fairies
to,
from the world, and different
yeah,
galactics of
I was just
fairies. It's
gonna
like,
say, like, yeah,
wouldn't that
exactly,
be
that would be
cool?
so cool. I was actually just thinking that, when I was, you know, in the last decade, I kind of have this, like, mental thought process about, like, all these different fairies are, like, different species or different cultures of fairies differently than different realms.
Mhm.
Like, just like right now, as well as for hundreds of years, there's been, you know, European, there's lots of countries within European. There's African, there's,
Mhm.
Asian, and
Mhm.
there's a few other ones. I'm not going to go into it because I don't want anyone to feel like they're left out. I'm
Mhm.
picking big portions outside of America because America is kind of a melting pot of things. Um, I've always kind of thought
Mhm.
of, like, I can, the fairies and the dragons is like a type of fairy, and like fairies that are connected
Mhm.
to aliens or like to visit those planets
Mhm.
are, you know, a type of species of some sort, and like, because like that's something that I'm like, there's like a fairy overlay. It's not like, or maybe there's like these are ancestors of each other and they've evolved. But like that's the one thing about fairies, like that would be that's all under that fairy anthropology. I just think that that would be such a fascinating study to like
Mhm.
really understand all the different families or races or sects of like fairies.
Yes, because then there's like fairies is just one thing, and there's so many kinds of fairies. But then you got your gnomes, you got your
Right.
elves, and your warlocks,
Warlocks,
and
yeah,
your, I
yeah, yeah.
mean,
But
well,
like,
that's
you,
not.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's really they're all related. But you know what I mean? There's so many creatures and beings and all of these things, and it exists. You know, I think again, I feel like that area around like the UK is definitely where like the kind of classic fairy comes from, and there's that is like, but I feel like that realm
yeah,
exists throughout the world, and like you said, there's it's like the dimensions are simultaneous with the third dimension. It's just all
yeah,
overlaid on top of each other, and you just like the more lower density you have, the less access you have to like how all of these things are like happening at the same place. It's just not
yeah,
cognizant. It's not
yeah. You're
English
only aware to
English yo.
your
It's not
timeline.
able to be made cognizant to
Yeah,
people.
it's kind of like the whole
Yes,
like time is
exactly.
not linear. Like you're really only cognizant to like your current position in the timeline unless you master another
Mhm.
source of jumping. Like, yeah, totally.
Mhm. Yes. Yes. But it really is all connected to me because yeah, it's just all the it's just a different realm that is here, and it's we kind of can have some glimpse into it when
Yeah,
we're lucky almost, or the more open we can be to it. But some people again are just very
yeah.
closed off to that. So
I think it's
anyways, I love talking about all this stuff.
I think at the end of the day, it's just fun to talk about. Like if you don't want to believe in any of this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
like on any degree of me or Frenchie, I think at the end of the day, it's fun to just like imagine, have fun with it, think about fairies, and just
Oh, you're
like
gonna
I just
make me
don't
cry.
think that that's anything that we should be taking in a way that's like, you know, it's one way or another. Like it's all it's fun to learn about if you
No, but I do ask people. I ask people if they believe in fairies, and if they say yes, I'm like, okay, cool, you're cool. If they say no, I'm like, I don't know if you. I can trust you because that means you don't believe in me, and that's not a good friend.
I feel like that
I'm like, look, I'm right
I
here.
feel
I'm
like
real.
when I am
Shit.
being a little bit of a spitfire and I want to get a reaction out of someone, I'll say something like I'm a witch, and if they have like a poor reaction, I'm like, oh, okay, well now I know you're not cool. Like
Yes, like
so
we can only go so far.
yeah,
Just
yeah. We'll have to do like a little mini series as like sometime down the road where we just like talk a little more in depth about fairies. Maybe we find a couple fairy stories or something because I just feel like there's just something about getting lost in that
Yes, and
world and like even like when you were reading about the cards, like I just feel like you just
yes.
get like lost in this magical like feeling. It's a different feeling than other things. Like
Time is
when we
different.
talk about like aliens and stuff, I feel warm.
Yes.
I get a little sway sometimes, but talking about fairies, I just
Mhm.
kind of feel like light and like I don't know, like I want to go dance in a field of flowers or something.
Yeah. Sometimes fairies make me go like, ooh, like there's just something very like when I talk about fairies, it's something really
Mesmerizing.
deep, and it's that feeling of twilight, like that feeling when the sun is going down, and like these are the times of where fairies are more likely to be like flitting between the realms is like those in between times, so like dawn,
Hmm.
dusk, noon, midnight, like all these times of change, like those times in between, and like all throughout my life, when it would be that dusk time when the sun is setting, and like I would just like sometimes my hair would stand on end, and I just get this electric
Mhm.
excitement, this like
Yeah.
electric feeling of being alive, and like when you see the plants in the fields and the
Woo!
trees, and it's like everything is just set on on this like fire that feels just it's magic to me. That is the feeling of magic, or one type of magic that I've always felt very, very attuned to, and like that to me is that fairy feeling. And this is, I love that you bring this up too, because it's like, yes, it's like that's a great exercise. I feel like for anybody listening is like, this is how you kind of start getting to discern these different energies and these different things. Is like, how do you feel when we're talking about energy, about fairies, and when we're tuning into that energy, and how do you feel when we talk about this galactic group and just aliens in general, and how is it different, and how is it similar, and like when we talk about witches, like what kind of
Mhm.
feelings does that bring up? Because it is like, it they're all so connected, and but they're not. And I feel like a fairy can be a
Mhm.
witch, and an alien
Mhm.
can be a fairy, but not all
Right.
aliens are
Yeah.
fairies, and
Yeah,
not
yeah,
all
yeah.
fairy, you know what I mean? So there's these different groups that are,
Well, it's just yeah.
there's wavy boundaries, but they all kind of have their
On
distinct
a
energies,
on a
you know?
very, like, superficial,
Yes.
non-spiritual or woo-woo way, it's just as the same as you can be Italian and Mexican, like, you can be both, like, it's similar, like, you can be both, you don't have to
Yes.
pick which one that you are if you are
Mhm.
both.
Mhm. Yes, and I feel, yeah, especially in these days, especially these kids these days, it's like, I feel like there's just so much
Overlapping.
that has been going on with all of the realms, and this is such a wild time. So I feel like it's there's a lot of both, there's a lot of all three, there's a lot of all four, like there's, you can be so many different things, you can be so multi-layered, and it's like you can have this in your family bloodline, but then it's also like your soul could have been all of these things in different
Yeah,
lifetimes, and like you get to choose, you get to feel what energy resonates with you and what feels good for you to identify with
yes.
or not identify with, or just understand more, or like, be more interested in whatever
Yeah,
whatever floats your boat. It's a cool time to
yeah,
be alive.
absolutely. I feel like the word that was
So
coming to
yes.
my mind, and I don't know if you heard me because you were actually explaining, so I just was like, I wasn't gonna keep piping up, but I feel like twilight and dusk is like mesmerizing, and I feel like that's the mesmerizing to me seems so magical in
Mm,
itself of a word, and I feel like everything you're describing
I
is
love that
exactly
word.
like how I feel, like mesmerizing the word, like how that word feels is how you were describing watching a sunset for me. Like that's how I feel when I'm watching a sunset. So we have that connection too. I just wanted to
Mm,
add that in of watching a
mhm.
sunset, and if I was
Oh, I
awake
love
for a
that.
sunrise, I would feel the same intensity of that like mesmerizing hold, and it like makes the chills,
Yes.
like I literally got the chills when you were saying that, but I don't know if you seen me. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, I feel like that's the word that would come up for me, and I feel like that's kind of the most spot on word for fairies for me. And that word applies for lots of things, aliens,
Mesmerizing.
witchcraft, like those things, all that kind of fit in this
Mhm.
alternative woo-woo-ness. Well, how some people say. I feel like all of that is just all it's just so mesmerizing, and it's and when you find the one that really makes your hair stand up, that's the one you need to look into. That's the one you want to like really dive into and like learn about it because there's probably more connections than you know.
Mhm. Yes. If your heart stops, if your breath changes, if your hair stands up, if you just have this weird feeling of like, wait, what? If there's a strange familiarity, like all these things are signs that you probably want to be looking more into this thing, whatever that thing is for you, or things are for you. So Yes, I feel like we maybe
Yeah.
want to be wrapping up
Yeah.
soon because I know we've
I
been
feel like
talking
this
for
is
a
a good
while,
little
but
conversation
this
about
has
fairies
been
and
such a
just
fun
all the ways
episode.
we can connect them to the things we've already talked about. It was a good
Hmm.
conversation. Well,
Yes, yes, we went in
yeah.
today. It was fun.
And you can always connect with us on Instagram or TikTok. Instagram at cosmiconnect.frenchieblooo and at TikTok,
And
cosmiconnect.the podcast.
TikTok at cosmiconnect
Yeah.
the podcast. Or you can email us, write in. We would love to hear from you. You can write into cosmiconnect.frenchieblooo@gmail.com. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you want to hear more about. Let us know anything you want to know. If you need advice on something, I would love to give you advice. If you want to know my opinion about something, I would love to give you my opinion. I'm sure Blue would as well, but I don't
I
want to
have
speak
great
for
ideas. If you need help with an idea, I'm your
you.
gal. I was just saying that to a friend earlier. I'm very good with ideas. So if you have something that you really like and you need a just some outside opinion on it and give you an idea to make it better, I'm your guy. I'm pretty good
Mhm.
at that.
Yes, I've experienced this firsthand. The idea is mind blowing.
Yes.
Blow you to the moon and back.
Well, we love you all and we hope you have a wonderful week.
We love you so much.
Peace.
Have a wonderful week. Thank you for tuning in. Peace.
See? Rushed it. Love you all. Bye.